Hello, everybody. Oh my gosh. We're here. Hold on. Let me get this set up for everybody before we get into this. Oh my gosh. Hello. Excuse the awful, awful congestion that you guys might be hearing right now. I have been fighting a cold for a couple days, so having a little bit of a dilemma on that end. But my name is Emma Saylor. I am the host of Bookish, and I'm so incredibly excited to be here with you guys today. I don't have a lot to go off of when it comes to introductions. I guess I could just say I'm 19. I'm a college student, and I love everything books, which is what inspired me to start this. Let's see. I don't know why it isn't letting you guys see this awesome background that I created. Let's see if it will let you. Okay, it's not going to let us, but that's okay. We're going to get into it. So in today's episode, or in every episode, we're going to start with a drink of the episode. Mine is kind of lame, so don't dislike it, but it is Fairlife protein. It's going to do the job. I came back from class earlier today at oh my gosh, I think it was what time did I get back from class? I think I got back from class 2 hours ago. Yeah. And I played with my cat because I have a cat now. I'm in love with this cat. His name is Blue, but I'm going to take a sip of our drink of the episode. I want to go into our first episode with a little bit of a funny story. So I have worked at Oracle Talk Radio for a couple months now as an intern, and you'd think I would know exactly how everything works, but you don't. You really don't. So I ended up creating this concept, and I thought to myself, okay, I'm going to start it on the 3rd. I had everything all set up. I had my mic, this handy dandy mic. I had all my notes written down with what I wanted to talk about, everything. And so I go in and I start and I record this whole episode. Nothing. I looked on. I was like, where's my episode? Where's my thing? I emailed around. No episode. There was no episode. So I was talking to myself for a complete hour, which is slightly embarrassing, guys. Slightly embarrassing, but it's okay. We do what we have to do. Anyways, I want to dive into a topic that when I first started reading back in the day, I thought would be a bigger topic of conversation. So, as a kid, the first book I ever really read, start to finish, was Dork Diaries. If you know what Dork Diaries is, you're a real one. Let me see if I can show on this exactly what Dork Diaries looks like. Hold on. Let's see if I can show you guys what Dork Diaries looks like. Yeah, I think I can. Hold on. Up in the corner. Do you see that? That is Dork Diaries. Wait, let me see if I can do that another way. Hold on, guys. This is a learning experience. Add overlay. Can we do it this way? Yes. There we go. Yes. If you recognize that, you're a real one. So that is Dork Diaries. If you are listening to this on audio, just search up Dork Diaries, the first thing that comes up. Any teenage girl will know exactly what I'm talking about. I loved those books as a kid. I think they were like the girl equivalent of Diary. Not Diary. Yeah, Diary of a Wimpy Kid, like Captain Underpants. So I started reading those books and I loved them. And then I got into middle school and we started reading these hard books. And in middle school, the hardest book we were reading was the Diary of Anne Frank. Nothing very, like, educational books. But again, when you're in 6th grade and those are the kinds of books you're reading, that's not a fun read. So that was my interpretation of reading. Until I came across this beautiful, lovely series that most people will probably know it was my, like, sophomore year, called The After series by Anna Todd. That was my beginning to reading, which is kind of scary, but that's what it was. So that's what started that, and I still hadn't read any classics, and then I read the first classic, which was, um, Lord of the Flies, and I feel like that is a great segue into the conversation that we're gonna be talking about today, and I'm going to tell you every single classic that I've read, the rating that I gave it, and if they're worth their time. If they are worth your time. I'm also going to dive in a little bit about books I think are going to become classics that obviously have been published within the last 20 years, I would say, so aren't necessarily marketed that way, but books that I believe will be or should be in the future. All right, guys. I am going to try try to get my little background on this thing. I wanna show you guys this amazing background before we do anything. Hold on, guys. Let's do no, it's not happening. It's not happening today. That's okay. No. Alright, guys. We're just gonna go with what we have. Anyways, let's start with every single classic that I've ever read and the rating. I feel like it's only fair to start with Pride and Prejudice. So, this is a book by Jane Austen. I've read her 4 most popular books, so Pride and Prejudice, Emma, Persuasion, and Sense and Sensibility. I have not read her sort of lesser known books, not for any specific reason, just because I'm not a big fan of Jane Austen's writing. Don't tell anybody I said that because very unpopular opinion. I don't necessarily love it. I think I went into Pride and Prejudice thinking that I was going to be reading this masterpiece, and I left it having felt meh. But but I did read it for the first time when I think I was like 16, 15. So not exactly the age that I would recommend reading a classic such as Pride and Prejudice, but I did give it 4 stars when I first read it. I think I would either give it less or more reading it upon a second time. As for Emma, obviously, obviously, because of that little thing right there, I was so excited to read this book. I ended up taking about 5 months to finish this book, and if you know me, you know I finish books pretty quickly. So, I can't really give you a good definitive reason, I just would put the book down and not really pick it back up again. It also is a book that you really have to sit and read, if that makes any sense. Like, if I'm reading the nutrition label on this, I'm not gonna sit here in my brain and say, "Filtered, low fat, grade A milk." I'm not gonna do that. I'm gonna just read it across. But I feel like for classic books, especially with Jane Austen's writing, you sort of have to do that to really understand what she's trying to say. And I did not want to do that. Not my type of fun. So it took me a lot longer, which made the book drag on in my head, obviously, but the ending was all worth it. I absolutely loved the character development that really wasn't there, but it was there. Um, I did give that one a 4 stars as well. Um, I will save my favorite for last. The most recent one I read was Sense and Sensibility, which I gave, I think, a 2-star. I ended up not really finishing that one. I kind of sped through it. I didn't really like it. I didn't really feel like the characters were quite redeemable, which is sort of what I had with Emma, but Emma I pushed through because I had a little bit of a personal reason. I wanted to know who Emma was. I wanted to know what everybody was talking about when they read Emma. I ended up giving that one 2 stars. But I think the main reason why anybody could sit somewhere and obsess over Jane Austen is Persuasion. Persuasion by Jane Austen is my favorite read by her. I read it, I think 2 years ago. There's a movie about it now. Absolutely, guys, if you take anything from this short little, every classic I've ever read, read Persuasion. It is absolutely breathtaking. It's a short read. I think it's about 200 or so pages. And chef's kiss. I annotated that book so completely. I actually have all my Jane Austens in my living room in my apartment. I have very beautiful editions because although I might not be a big Jane Austen fan, her books are beautiful. But I give that one 5 stars, which is a big difference between the other books that I've read by her and their ratings. But I digress. Overall, what I would say about if they're worth your time, I think that's up to personal discretion. But I would say yes, because it's like, it's a Jane Austen. It's a Jane Austen. You gotta read the Jane Austen. Are you kidding me? You gotta read. If you're a reader, you have to. It's like a part of the job requirement. So, are they worth your time? Yes. Do some of you might not want to hear that? Probably, but hey, it's okay. Moving on from Jane Austen, we're going to talk about Little Women by Louisa May Alcott. This is also a 5-star read for me. I felt like this book was one of the best books I had read in my life at that time. I read it about 2 years ago. I do want to reread it. I want to get a tattoo of this book. There's a quote on it. I don't know if I could completely recite it by memory. I think it's something like, my dear child, know that there is always light beyond the clouds. And I want to get a tattoo of a moon and then some clouds. This book, if you've never heard of it or never seen the movie, it talks about this family of girls who's just that, a family of girls who's experiencing adolescence in a time that none of us could relate to, and yet we all could relate to them on some level. There's always that topic of conversation between my reader friends of which March sister are you? I definitely feel a little akin to Meg, but I also am very akin to Jo. Very opposite scales. But yes, 100% worth your time. It doesn't read like a traditional classic, in my opinion, and not in a bad way. It reads sort of like a traditional fictional novel that you might pick up in this day and age, but with so much more depth. And oh my gosh, like, if you've seen the movie, like, it's so perfect. Oh my gosh, I can't even. I'll go on a tangent about Little Women. I am so sorry for my congestion. If it's bothering you, I'm not permanently congested, but I do permanently have allergies during this time of year. I love the fall, but the allergies constantly kick my butt, like actually all the time. Next one. Oh my gosh, we have so many like good ones back to back here. The Great Gatsby. This one I actually do have a tattoo for. It's on my ankle and it's a boat. And it's meant to symbolize the final sentence in the book, which is, "So we beat on boats against the current, borne back ceaselessly into the past." I read that book for the first time, I think I was 15, and I immediately felt a connection to it. Not because I felt similar to any of the characters, but I felt sort of attached to the story itself and the symbolism behind it. If any of you have ever read The Great Gatsby, you know that there's so many ways to look at it and avenues and opinions. And I remember I wrote a paper on it and I did a presentation on The Great Gatsby, both of which I felt so excited to do because of how many perspectives you can have on such a book. I wrote a paper where I sort of took influence from The Great Gatsby and 1984 for a final project in my humanities class like a year ago. Um, and there's just so many avenues to look at it by, and I used the Dr. Jekyll little glasses, Eckelberg um, glasses in the book to symbolize something. But yes, 100% worth your time. I've read it twice. The second time I annotated it to the nines, and just the amount of conversations I could have with people about it is insane. Unfortunately, not a lot of people read classics, and not a lot of my friends do because it is, I mean, it is kind of a boring. It's not the form of escapism that you would find if you picked up just a fantasy novel, if that makes any sense. Um, 5 stars, obviously. The next one is one I do definitely want to talk about with you guys is The Lord of the Flies. So I read this book sophomore year of high school. Sophomore year of high school. A lot of these I read that year, but this was a required reading. So was The Great Gatsby, but no, I read The Lord of the Flies my junior year. I apologize. Great Gatsby was my sophomore year. But anyways, not that that matters. Lord of the Flies, I had to write a paper on it. And talking about the symbolism behind it, I remember going into the book being so confused because anybody who's reading the book and finishing it without the sort of direction that I had would probably hate it. The symbolism that this author put in this book deserves an award. And I'm pretty sure he literally won an award for this book, as he should, because it actually blew my mind. I remember I would read, the required, 25 pages or whatever it was before going into class the next day. And I would sit in front with my little book. I would have my book here, just like this. And she would just dive into it. And you know how the traditional English teacher, oh, the blue curtains and all this stuff and all these beautiful things. And you feel like, girl, why do you need to divulge into the blue curtains about 40 times? The blue curtains were a must in this instance. Genuinely an amazing book. I want to reread it. I want to see it from my personal lens. I think about Piggy all the time because of how everything played out. I'm so sorry about the yawn, excuse me, but genuinely such an amazing read. 5-star at the time. I don't know if I'd give it a 5-star now, just I don't know, but I think 5-star for the writing and the interpretation. A 5-star read has to really impact me. I don't know if it really impacted me that much, but an amazing classic. All right, water break. Okay. We're going into Shakespeare. So just hold your hats for a second. I know that might be a rough topic of conversation for anybody who has ever gone to school. The next book that I'm going to share will have a kindred connection. Macbeth. Let's have a moment of silence for Macbeth. Okay, moment over. Macbeth, I also read. I did read this. This was required reading. And I hated it. I mean, come on. It's Macbeth. It's required. I think the thing about classics that I had to take away from is the fact that I'm not always going to love it. I'm not going to come away from that book being so attached. I didn't understand any of the dialect. I was so confused. I was like, okay, we have Macbeth. He comes into this story. There's a king. Macbeth betrays some guy. All of a sudden, the biggest plot twist of the century, we have Mrs. Macbeth. And then you also have a person who was birthed out of their mom or whatever. And you get a plot twist of JK, he had a C-section. Lots of plot twists, lots of things. I will say, I can commend Shakespeare for an amazingly done prank on Macbeth. Did not care. I don't think it's worth your time. Not because I think in retrospect every classic is, but if we're talking about like Shakespeare books that you should read, you're good. You don't need, you're good. There's other ones that are more appealing to especially a younger audience. I mean, if you're older, I think you might feel a little bit different than I would, but if you're around my age, I feel like you would agree. The next one is Romeo and Juliet, which I think everybody who isn't even a reader knows exactly what I'm talking about when I say Romeo and Juliet. I read this once in 8th grade. Oh my gosh. 8th grade feels like a while ago, but I read it then. We read the play in class. And at that time in my life, if I was put as Juliet, whoever was put as Romeo was the love of my life. So I owe Romeo and Juliet to some delusions, but I also owe Romeo and Juliet for a beautiful love story that I recently reread and realized how actually amazing this love story is. I will say, Romeo is very delusional himself. If we're talking about delusions, he literally was, if you reread the story, you'll know that in the beginning he was like obsessed with this girl and he was getting over her, and then all of a sudden comes Juliet at this ball and he's like, oh my gosh, why would I ever not be in love with her? I couldn't really tell you. It is worth your time because it's Romeo and Juliet, but I can't promise, I can't make any promises to you at this current point in time. The next one is Much Ado About Nothing. This is my favorite classic by Shakespeare that I've read. I literally visibly giggled. I visibly giggled. Like I was sitting in a cafe in London reading this book, and I was sitting there with my friend, and she was like, why are you laughing at Shakespeare? And I felt a little embarrassed, but then I also felt very, what's the word? I also felt very cool for laughing at Shakespeare to get it enough. If you don't know anything about this book, which I had no idea even existed before walking into a little vintage store, essentially it's about two people who hate each other, but they're secretly in love. And they like are making fun of each other the entire time, but also literally falling in love with each other the entire time. I ate it up. I think it was so funny. I wish I had the book with me right now so I could share some quotes with you guys because it's so hilarious the way that they hate each other so much that they are so in love. I don't even have the answer to you guys about if it's worth your time because maybe it's not. Maybe it's not, but at least for me it was. Um Next we have Julius Caesar, which is also a required reading for a lot of people. Et tu Brute, got that out of it. Julius Caesar, what else did I get out of it? Some just general history, you know. Good on you, Shakespeare. Cool movie? Question mark. Other than that, not really worth your time. You could just look up Julius Caesar and figure it out, from there. Next, we have The Tempest, which is famous if you're maybe 80 years old, not to hate. I did read it because I want to read If We Were Villains. And a lot of people, oh my gosh, yes, my only love sprung from my only hate. I love that. I love that. Wait, let me share that on my screen. I love that that person knew that. My only love sprung from my only hate. Much Ado About Nothing is probably one of the best enemies to lovers out there. That's all I can say. The Tempest is probably my least favorite Shakespeare, aside from Macbeth and Julius Caesar. I have a lot. I'm not trying to hate on him, but I'm just saying. Next, we have Midsummer's Night's Dream, which is famous more so because it is famous for its title. I didn't know anything about it. I just knew the title, Midsummer's Night's Dream. If you want an explanation of this book, I can give it to you because it's not worth the time to read it. I've read it, so you don't have to. It's basically, when you're really sick as a kid or just any time in life and you have this like fever dream, like you're laying on your couch, you got Dayquil next to you got every type of medicine lined up on the counter. And you close your eyes and all of a sudden you're transported. You are surrounded by goblins. You all of a sudden are trying to convince somebody that they're in love with you, but they're not. They're not in love with you. And you have a magical spell that's happening at the same time. A lot of different layers to it. And then you wake up and all of a sudden you're not in that forest filled with goblins. You're actually on your couch, still surrounded by Dayquil and NyQuil. That is exactly what that book is. And I really hope that explained it to the best of its ability. I don't really remember much about that book other than everybody in that book was delusional. Okay, done with Shakespeare. I haven't really read any other ones that I can think of, but I am currently in the process of reading Antony and Cleopatra. That's the last one that I really plan on reading. There's so many other ones. There's like Hamlet. There's so many other things that I will probably read in my lifetime, but I'm going to be done after Antony and Cleopatra. The last classic that I've ever read that I can think of, because I don't even remember what I read in high school. High school is blocked out, guys. Was Frankenstein, guys. Frankenstein is probably the most underrated. I'm going to say this close to the microphone so everybody knows. Frankenstein is underrated. I said it, guys. I said it. Frankenstein is so underrated. I ate that book up. I also read it for school, but I loved it. It was so good. I felt like it touched on so many great topics. It does take it does take the Shakespeare out of us, and I feel like most of the time when you're really looking into Shakespeare, you're just thinking about school and genuinely don't. Much Ado About Nothing is amazing. Back on Frankenstein, I read it in I think 2 sittings. I felt like the ending of that book, it just touched, like it literally just made me feel so sad. My favorite quote from that entire book is, you hate me, but your abhorrence cannot equal with which I hate myself. So sad. And that's Frankenstein saying that. So sad. I definitely also want to reread that. A lot of these are ones that you can continuously reread as time goes on. So that way you can have a different perspective, especially The Great Gatsby. Especially The Great Gatsby. But those are all the classics that I've read. I can't really think of any other ones that I want to read. I've read most of them. There's obviously a lot of Hemingway. There's different ones like Jane Eyre. Oh my gosh, like a lot of like oh my gosh. I just remembered another one, guys. And I think this one's going to cause a little bit of a commotion, but I just need you to stay with me here. Wuthering Heights. Wuthering Heights I read during the time of Pride and Prejudice. I hated it. And I don't know whether I hated it because I didn't understand what was happening or if I hated it because it was just boring. I really can't explain why I hated it other than I remember reading it and not really understanding what was going on. And at that time in my life, that was all I needed to know. If you don't know what it's about, it's famous for the quote, "He is half my soul." He's half my soul. Something, something, something. He's more myself than I am. Which is in itself a beautiful quote. The book is sort of an enemies to lovers romance between two people who are destined not to be together. And it's talked in sort of like a future past where somebody in the future is talking about it, like telling this story. I would recommend it, question mark. I haven't read it in so long that I feel like I would need to reread it to really tell people if it's worth your time. But if you are trying to get into Yes. Wait, I'm gonna put that on screen. He's more myself than I am. Whatever our souls are made of, his and mine are the same. That is the beautiful quote from Wuthering Heights. It's very famous for that quote. Obviously beautiful, but the rest of the story, not my favorite. Anyways, I don't think I'm thinking about any other quotes now that or books. I don't think so. I can't believe I forgot Wuthering Heights. It's a very famous one. I did start Jane Eyre. I didn't finish it. I remember my high school English teacher told me I would really love it, that it was really funny. And as a 15-year-old, telling me that classic was going to be funny was kind of just like telling me my hair looked bad. Like, it was like, do I look like a nerd? Which, when you're 15 years old, that's the worst thing to be. And now here I am, the biggest book nerd on the planet. So you know what? The universe is healing. I'm going to go into the books that I think will be classics in the future. I'm very curious to hear if anybody's read these and their opinions, or any personal ones that they would think would be classics in the future. But we're going to do a dote break. I also have water here. This is my Stanley, and then I have my protein shake. A little fun fact about me is I will constantly have drinks around me. Water, protein shake, usually, then an energy drink, coffee too. Oh yeah, coffee. I usually start my day with one full Stanley, and then I end my day with another full Stanley. I'm a drink girl till I die, guys. Anyways, back to books. The books that I think will be classics there's a lot of them, but I just wrote a couple for time's sake. The first one is A Little Life by Hanya Y. If anybody's read that, I kind of want to share. I wish I had a picture of it on the screen, but I don't have one on my downloaded. But I read this book a couple years ago because everybody was talking about it. That is a sad book. It's like the saddest book you'll ever read, and all these things. And, I decided to take the challenge on my own. Never doing that again. Never listening to anybody's book recommendation that starts with, "This book's really sad." I honestly, personally, don't want to recommend the book because I don't want somebody to read it on my account. It is that sad, and trigger warning, please check trigger warnings before you ever read this book. It is absolutely awful. With that being said, the writing is beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. It's a long book. It feels like something that would be in a curriculum somewhere, if like there was ever a class for like sad books or enriching literature, like sad enriching literature or something like that. This would be the center of the class, and if I ever taught that. It is about this group of friends centered around somebody named Jude St. Francis, and it starts in, I think, New York. I think that's where it's set. And it starts, all four of them, they're great friends, they're living in New York, and it just follows them over the course of their life. And I can't really even describe it anymore because I don't even know how to. Again, I don't want to recommend this book because it is really, really awful. I probably was far too young to read it, so I wouldn't read it if you are under 18, and I really seriously mean that. Just not a great, enriching read. But I feel like when we look at classics in modern day literature and we analyze, Jane Austen's, or we analyze, Shakespeare, we don't look at it as, the tragic stories of Romeo and Juliet and the tragic story of Macbeth, and we're looking at all these tragedies. We're not looking at it as, "Oh my gosh, that was so sad, that was awful, like, don't read it." We're looking at it more in a pragmatic way of, this book taught me this, or this book was so enriching as a piece of literature. So if you're going into that book and you do decide to read it, I want to make it known I'm not recommending you the book because it is not a positive read. And please check trigger warnings. But it is an incredibly enriching story about life and love and loss and pain and wow. Like just wow. I was actually talking to my friend about it earlier today because she got the book. She purchased it. And I said to her, I was like, just please be careful going into it because it will make you think about things. It will probably make your mental health go down for a little bit. Like that's how serious this book is. Um, I don't really have much else to say about it because there's so many like contradicting feelings that I have on the book, but I didn't even rate the book. There's no rating. Because I just how do you rate a book so prolific yet awful yet great at the same time? Um, moving on. Any Olivia Blake book. So I've read all of her books except Masters of Death, which is actually on my windowsill right now as a book I really want to read. Um, I think I could argue that every single one will become a classic, but excuse me. Oh my gosh, I shouldn't be this tired at 4 o'clock on a Tuesday, but I feel like when you're in college, every second is tiring. Anyways, but the one that I feel is most likely to become a classic is the one that I like the least. Not because of that. I don't want to say that if you don't like a book, like a classic means you don't like it. I'm just saying the way it's written. And it is Alone with You in the Ether. It's her shortest book, I'm pretty sure. I definitely think that one will become a classic. It is so like kind of like the characters kind of suck, but I think that's what makes a classic a classic. If the book doesn't kind of suck a little bit, then is it really a classic? You know what I mean? Like there has to be sort of a human element to it. It almost makes when a book is so good, it almost makes me like the book less because of it's like, did a human actually write this? You know, the human touch to it. You know, that layer of these characters aren't perfect and they're making these stupid mistakes and I hate that they're doing this and it's ruining the story, but also maybe the story was meant to be ruined for it to be good, which I think it applies to a lot of things in life. There's also the Atlas Six, which is my favorite by her. I cannot wait to read the next two. I don't know why I haven't. I've just been putting it off, but um, and then what's the other book by her? I'm blanking. Um, oh my gosh. One of My Enemies. I think that's what it's called. One of My Enemies. One for My Enemy. Oh my gosh. It's a Romeo and Juliet retelling, which just ties this all together because it's definitely not going to be a classic because there's already a classic of Romeo and Juliet, but wow. Wow. What a story. Bawled my eyes out. Oh my gosh. Such a Olivia Blake should just be a classic. Like I think this moral of this is Olivia Blake is the classic. That's what she is. Next one is The Song of Achilles. He is half my soul, as the poets say. Yeah, that's all I really need to say about that. But this is I haven't read any Greek mythology like the Iliad or anything like that. But if you aren't familiar with Achilles and Patroclus, they are a part of, I believe, the Iliad. And they fought together and they were really great friends. And this story takes into consideration the thought that they weren't just friends, that they were lovers, and that Achilles was this, big hero, and Patroclus is this man who is just so in love with him. And I read this when I was 15. A lot of these books I read when I was 15, which makes me kind of sad that I haven't found a book this amazing since then, but whatever. It is not my favorite book I've ever read. I think if I reread it, I would be more touched than I was when I was 15. But I guess that kind of goes for a lot of things when you do anything when you're 15. But the story follows both of them falling in love. And if you know anything about their story, you'll kind of be spoiled. Just like if you were to read a Romeo and Juliet retelling, like you're gonna get spoiled either way because you know what happens. But I didn't know their story going into it, and I'm so glad I didn't because it made the story hit harder. And when I was in London, they have a Achilles and Patroclus painting in the National Gallery, and then they also have this statue in the Kensington Gardens. Oh my gosh, just hits so different. Don't go to London until you've read Song of Achilles. That's all I have to say. That's all. Don't just. That's all. Also, Shakespeare. You have to read a Shakespeare because when you go around London, it's just constant Shakespeare everywhere. Anyways, now I'm getting off on my London tangent, which we could talk about forever, but we won't. Next we have Wayward by Amelia Hart, which is so not talked about enough, I feel like, in the book world. Excuse me. Just had to take a dote break. If you're new, dote is drink of the episode. So, Wayward is a story about 3 women from different time periods, all in the same family. The one is this girl named Altha. I think her name Altha. Altha is on trial for witchcraft. And then we have Violet, who's pre-World War II, I forget. And then I think Kate is her name. She's like current time. And it just follows them as women during this like their time periods. And I don't really want to go into too much detail, but they talk about the word wayward and how in Macbeth, the word wayward was replaced by weird in later editions. And the word weird sisters in Macbeth was used to describe witches. And wayward was the previous word used to describe them. I have recommended this book to everybody in my life because it is so incredibly prolific, especially if you're a female, but anybody honestly should read it because it's just an amazing book. And if it doesn't become a classic, then I will single-handedly make it so. It's a short book. I actually purchased it for my friend's birthday in a week, and I'm going to annotate it for her because I'm just trying to get anybody and everybody to read it. Next we have Call Me By Your Name by Andrea Seaman. I read this twice. I actually annotated it the second time I read it because the first time I read it, I didn't appreciate it enough. I just saw the peach scene for what it was. The second time I read it, just definitely a 6-star read for me. I don't know of another book that has made me feel so, like it was just a real story. It felt like I was reading a diary rather than a book that was fictional. I love, 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 love the story. I love what Andrea Seaman did. I love the movie. The person who actually directed Call Me By Your Name directed Challengers, which I clocked like literally immediately as I started watching Challengers. I was like, this feels like Call Me By Your Name. I wonder if it's the same director. And it was, because of how distinct the book and the movie just kind of go together. Next, we have Hunger Games, which I do want to like plan out an entire episode discussing every little tiny bit of Hunger Games. So I won't really go too much in detail, but I will say that it, I think, is already a classic. I mean, it's been out for like 15 years, something like that, 20 years. It's already a classic. It deserves the fame that it has been given. The last and final book that I think will become a classic is The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue by V.E. Schwab. This book follows a girl who is engaged to be married. I think that she's like the 14th century, something like that. She doesn't want to get married. She sees all these women, these girls her age, getting married, and she doesn't want to be a part of it. So she makes a deal with the devil. And the devil, she begs the devil, I don't want to be here. I don't, da-da-da-da-da. The devil grants her wish. So nobody, she never ages. So she's allowed the ability to never age, and she can just do whatever she wants, and she doesn't have to get married. She can leave. But her curse is that nobody remembers who she is. So if she meets somebody, as soon as she leaves the room, they forget she ever existed. And it follows her story over forever until one day she goes into a library. She meets this guy, she leaves, she comes back the next day, and the guy remembers her. And so it follows that. It also follows kind of a weird relationship with this devil, you know. I actually currently want to reread it because I haven't read it in a while. A lot of these are books that I think are easily rereadable because, again, like I've said like a million times, they're the type of book that you can read at any stage of your life and have a different opinion on it. So that's currently um, my plan. That is all that I wanted to talk to you guys about today, but I do have a little um, announcement. My biggest goal with this was I wanted to create a little bit of a book club. So for the Bookish book club pick for this month, I have chosen Five Star Stranger by I think it's Kat Tang. It's a short read, it's about 200 pages, and it's about this man who gets hired to be this girl's father. So this woman, she hires this man to play this girl's father, and the girl doesn't know. And it follows him experiencing this and what a relationship means, you know, all these different sentiments about blood thicker than water, all those things. So that is our book club pick. I will probably talk about that in about 3 episodes. So you have 3 episodes to read it. It's super short. It's like 250 pages, so should be super easy. But that is all for the first episode of Bookish. I am so excited to start this and, you know, gain a lot of valuable experience. If you are ever looking for any thing else on Bookish, you can follow the podcast. I will actually put it right below here. And if you're looking for any and all paranormal or any and all music or anything like that, make sure to stay on Oracle Talk Radio. It's the best. And I will see you guys next time.